Have you ever searched for something on Amazon and then seen ads for that exact product follow you around the internet for days? You're scrolling through Facebook, boom, there it is. You're reading the news, there it is again. You're checking the weather, and somehow that pair of shoes you looked at once is staring back at you. Everyone says it's just targeted advertising, no big deal. But here's what nobody tells you about what's actually happening every single time you click on anything online. Your digital footprint isn't just being tracked, it's being bought, sold, and analyzed in ways that would absolutely blow your mind. In the next 15 minutes, you're gonna understand exactly how cookies have turned the internet into the most sophisticated surveillance system ever created, and why even people who have nothing to hide should care deeply about this. Here's what's really happening when you browse the internet. You think you're just visiting websites, reading articles, shopping, watching videos. Feels pretty straightforward, right? But behind every single page you visit, there's this invisible auction happening in milliseconds. Companies you've never heard of are bidding on your attention based on everything they know about you. And they know a lot more than you think. Think about it this way. You wake up Saturday morning and check your phone. You open Instagram while you're still in bed. Then you switch to Chrome and look up best coffee makers because yours just died. You browse a few sites, don't buy anything, then head to YouTube to watch some videos. By the time you've finished your first cup of coffee from your old dying coffee maker, somewhere between 50 and 200 different companies have collected data about you. Not just that you looked at coffee makers. They know what time you woke up, what device you're using, your approximate location, what you watched on YouTube, how long you stayed on each website, whether you scrolled to the bottom of the page or bounced immediately. And this matters because every single one of those data points gets added to a profile that follows you everywhere. It's not just about seeing ads for coffee makers. It's about how these companies are building a psychological profile of who you are, what you want, what you fear, what makes you click. They're predicting your behavior better than your closest friends can. And they're selling that predictive power to anyone willing to pay for it. Everyone tells you to just delete your cookies if you're worried about privacy. But that's not what actually happens. What really happens is that cookies are just the tip of the iceberg. They're the part of the tracking system you can see and control. Underneath, there's this entire ecosystem of tracking methods that don't need cookies at all. Browser fingerprinting, super cookies, pixel tracking, device fingerprinting. These companies have built backup systems for their backup systems. Deleting your cookies is like putting a Band-Aid on a broken arm. So let's talk about what cookies actually are, because most people have it completely backwards. When you hear cookie, you might think about those annoying pop-ups that say, this website uses cookies, and you click accept without reading. But here's the thing that might shock you. Cookies weren't invented to track you. They were invented to help you. Back in the early days of the internet, websites couldn't remember anything about you. Every time you clicked to a new page, the website had amnesia. You'd add something to a shopping cart, click to another page, and boom, your cart was empty. You'd log into a site, navigate around, and it would forget you were logged in. This was incredibly frustrating. So in 1994, a guy named Lou Montulli at Netscape invented cookies to solve this problem. A cookie is just a tiny text file that a website stores on your computer to remember things about you. Your login status, your shopping cart, your preferences, genuinely helpful stuff. But here's where things get interesting. Companies realized they could use cookies for something else entirely. If they could remember you from page to page on their own website, they could also remember you across different websites. And that's when cookies transformed from helpful tools into surveillance devices. There's this pattern I call the helpful tool trap. It's when something gets created to solve a genuine problem, but then gets repurposed for something completely different, usually something that benefits companies at your expense. Your phone's location services started so you could get directions. Now it tracks everywhere you go and sells that data. Your smart TV started to give you better streaming options. Now it watches what you watch and reports back. Facebook started to connect college students. Now it's a data collection machine that happens to show you posts from your friends. This matters because when something starts helpful, we let our guard down. We think, oh, Cookies help websites remember my shopping cart. That's convenient. We don't think cookies are creating a permanent record of everywhere I go online that gets shared with hundreds of companies I've never heard of. And that's exactly what happens to most people. They accept cookies without thinking because cookies sound harmless, like the baked goods. Who's afraid of cookies? Think about Sarah. She's a 8-year-old teacher in Austin. She considers herself pretty tech savvy. She uses strong passwords. She doesn't fall for phishing emails. She's careful about what she posts on social media. But Sarah has no idea that there's a company called Axiom that has over 3,000 data points about her. They know her income bracket, her political leanings, her health concerns, her shopping habits, her family size, her education level, her hobbies, and her likelihood to make impulse purchases. Sarah never gave Axiom permission to collect any of this. She's never even heard of Axiom, yet they know her better than some of her coworkers do. Here's what Sarah doesn't realize. Every time she visits a website, that site isn't just using its own cookies. It's loading cookies from dozens of other companies. These are called third-party cookies. The website she's visiting is basically saying, hey, come on in everyone, check out Sarah while she's here. It's like if you walked into Target and Target immediately invited 50 other companies to follow you around the store, taking notes on everything you looked at, touched, or thought about buying. And if you think that's wild, check this out. These third-party cookies communicate with each other. Company A drops a cookie on your browser. Company B drops a different cookie. But companies A and B have agreements to share data. So they're pooling their information about you. Company A knows you were shopping for running shoes. Company B knows you just searched for information about knee pain. Together, they deduce you're a runner with knee problems. Now you're getting targeted ads for orthopedic insoles, physical therapy, and low-impact exercise equipment. You never explicitly told anyone you're a runner with knee pain, but they figured it out by connecting the dots from your cookies. This pattern shows up everywhere once you know to look for it. Your browser history tells a story, your shopping patterns reveal your concerns, your timing shows your schedule. Every click is a breadcrumb. And there are hundreds of companies whose entire business model is following your breadcrumb trail and selling the map to advertisers. Here's what makes this even more surprising. The most valuable cookies aren't about what you buy, they're about what you almost buy. What you research but don't purchase. What you look at repeatedly, what you abandon in your cart, because that reveals what you want, what you're unsure about, what you're willing to spend. That's predictive data. That's the gold mine. Insurance companies buy cookie data to figure out who to charge higher premiums. Employers buy cookie data to screen job candidates. Landlords buy cookie data to decide who to rent to. Banks buy cookie data to determine creditworthiness. This isn't theoretical. This is happening right now. That time you Googled how to treat depression or unemployment benefits or divorce lawyer, that data is out there, being bought and sold, potentially affecting real decisions about your life. Now, this next pattern is particularly sneaky because it exploits how we think about privacy. There's this thing I call the nothing to hide fallacy. It's when people say, I don't care about tracking because I've got nothing to hide. But here's the uncomfortable truth about that statement. You absolutely do have things you want to keep private. Everyone does. And more importantly, privacy isn't about hiding bad things. It's about maintaining autonomy over your own information and identity. You might not care if companies know you like pizza, but you probably care if your health insurance company knows you're researching expensive medical treatments and decides to raise your rates before you get diagnosed. You might not care if advertisers know you're into hiking, but you probably care if your boss finds data suggesting you're job hunting and decides to pass you over for a promotion. You might not care if retailers know you like true crime podcasts, but you probably care if that gets misinterpreted as a risk factor when you're applying for an apartment. Your brain does this because it's designed to assess threats based on immediate, obvious danger. Back when we were living in small tribes, privacy mostly meant don't let the neighboring tribe know where we store our food. The threats were concrete and visible. But in today's world, the threat of data tracking is abstract and invisible. You can't see the cookies being dropped. You can't see the profiles being built. You can't see the data being sold. So your brain thinks there's no threat. But just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not happening. This is where things get really interesting. Cookies are actually becoming less important to the tracking industry, not because companies are respecting privacy more, but because they've invented better methods. When Apple and Mozilla started blocking third-party cookies by default in Safari and Firefox, the tracking industry didn't pack up and go home. They evolved. There's a technique called browser fingerprinting. Your browser tells websites a ton of information to help them display pages correctly. Your screen resolution, your installed fonts, your plugins, your time zone, your language settings, your graphics card. Individually, these seem innocent. But when you combine them, they create a unique fingerprint that identifies you almost as precisely as cookies do. And you can't delete a fingerprint the way you can delete cookies. Researchers at the Electronic Frontier Foundation studied browser fingerprinting and found that about 94% of browsers have a completely unique fingerprint. Out of hundreds of thousands of browsers tested, yours is probably identifiable. You can clear all your cookies, use incognito mode, even use a VPN, and websites can still recognize you by your fingerprint. It's like wearing a mask to hide your identity but walking with a distinctive limp. People can still figure out who you are. Then there's pixel tracking. You know those one-pixel invisible images embedded in emails and websites? Those are tracking pixels. When your email loads that invisible pixel, it tells the sender you opened the email, when you opened it, what device you used, and your approximate location. Companies embed these pixels everywhere. That newsletter you subscribe to, tracking pixel. That promotional email from Target, tracking pixel. That article you read, multiple tracking pixels from different companies, all reporting back, but here's what nobody wants to admit. The deepest issue isn't the technology. It's the business model. The entire modern internet is built on surveillance capitalism. Free websites and apps aren't actually free. You're paying with your data and attention. Facebook doesn't charge you money because they make way more by selling access to your attention to advertisers. Google doesn't charge you for search because your queries reveal what you want, and that's worth billions. YouTube doesn't charge you for videos because the more they learn about what you watch, the better they can keep you watching and watching ads. What's actually happening is that we've created an economy where your personal information is the product, not the thing you're buying, the thing being sold. Every time you use a free service, you're entering into a transaction where you give up data in exchange for convenience. Except nobody explained the terms of that transaction. Nobody told you exactly what data you're giving up or how it'll be used. The terms of service are 50 pages of legal jargon nobody reads. It's like signing a mortgage blindfolded. This isn't because tech companies are run by evil villains who hate privacy. It's because they've discovered that detailed behavioral data is phenomenally valuable and collecting it is incredibly profitable. And once you've built a multi-billion-dollar business on that model, it's almost impossible to change course. Your entire infrastructure, your stock price, your investors, everything depends on continuing to extract maximum data from users. And it's the reason why privacy laws keep getting weakened or ignored, because the companies that benefit from data collection are now some of the most powerful corporations on Earth. They can afford armies of lobbyists, they can fund politicians' campaigns, they can shape the conversation about what privacy should mean in the digital age. When California passed GDPR-style privacy regulations, tech companies spent millions figuring out loopholes and minimum compliance strategies. They're not trying to protect your privacy, they're trying to collect as much data as legally possible while appearing to care about privacy. Let me tell you about Marcus. Marcus is also 28, also lives in Austin, also uses the internet constantly, but Marcus understood something Sarah didn't. He realized that privacy isn't a binary state. You either have it or you don't. Privacy is a spectrum. And even if he can't achieve perfect privacy, he can make tracking way harder and way less profitable. Marcus uses Firefox with strict tracking protection enabled. He uses DuckDuckGo instead of Google for searches that don't get logged. He has uBlock Origin installed to block ads and trackers. He uses a privacy-focused email service instead of Gmail. When he shops online, he clears his cookies afterward. When sites demand cookie acceptance, he uses the reject all option when available. He doesn't use Facebook or Instagram on his phone, he accesses them through the browser with containers that isolate their cookies. Notice how Marcus isn't living off the grid or using exclusively encrypted messaging apps. He's not perfect. He still uses YouTube. He still orders from Amazon sometimes. He's still online and connected. But Marcus understood something crucial. Every barrier you put up makes tracking less profitable. If enough people make tracking harder, the economics of surveillance capitalism start to break down. Here's what happened. After 6 months of these habits, Marcus noticed something. He was seeing way more generic ads. His social media feeds felt less creepily targeted. When he searched for something, it didn't follow him around the internet for weeks. He had successfully disrupted the tracking infrastructure just enough that his data became less valuable. Not worthless, but definitely less useful for the precision targeting that makes tracking so profitable. And here's what makes this even more interesting. Marcus didn't lose any real convenience. He could still shop online, he could still use social media, he could still watch videos and read articles. The tracking wasn't actually making his experience better. It was making advertisers' targeting better. Once Marcus cut out the middleman, he realized he'd been giving up privacy for basically nothing in return. So what's really going on here? It's not actually about cookies at all. It's about the fundamental power imbalance in how the internet works right now. On one side, you have billion-dollar companies with teams of engineers and data scientists whose job is to extract maximum information from you. On the other side, you have regular people who just want to check email and watch cat videos without being surveilled. The people who benefit from tracking make it as complicated and confusing as possible, so most people just give up and click accept all. The people who avoid these traps don't have special technical skills. They understand the game being played. They know that companies want you to believe tracking is inevitable, essential, and mostly harmless. They know that free services are actually transactions where you're selling your privacy. They know that convenience often comes with a hidden cost. And once you see it this way, everything changes. These patterns aren't personal failures. They're predictable traps that everyone falls into because they're designed to be invisible and unavoidable. But now that you understand how cookies actually work, and more importantly, how they're just one piece of a much larger tracking ecosystem, you can make different choices. You can't opt out completely, but you can make yourself a harder target. You can make your data less valuable. You can vote with your digital feet by using services that respect privacy. So here's what we've uncovered. Cookies started as helpful tools, but became surveillance devices. The real tracking happens through systems you can't even see, like browser fingerprinting and pixel tracking. Third-party cookies connect your behavior across completely different websites. Your data gets sold to companies making real decisions about your life insurance, employment, housing, credit. Privacy laws exist, but get circumvented by companies with armies of lawyers. And the entire system works because most people don't understand what's happening or feel powerless to change it. But here's the thing, you're not powerless. Every time you reject unnecessary cookies, every time you use a privacy-focused browser, every time you question why an app needs certain permissions, you're pushing back against surveillance capitalism. You're saying that your privacy has value, that your data belongs to you, that the internet doesn't have to work this way. The question isn't whether you can completely stop all tracking. You probably can't, not without going completely off the grid. The question is whether you'll recognize the tracking infrastructure when you encounter it, because now you know what's happening behind those accept all cookies buttons. You know about third-party cookies, you know about browser fingerprinting, you know about the business model that turns your behavior into profit. You can't unknow it. So next time you see that cookie banner pop up, ask yourself, am I accepting because it's genuinely helpful, or am I accepting because clicking reject all takes 3 more seconds and I just want to read this article? Because once you see how the entire internet has been optimized to extract data from you, clicking reject all starts to feel less like an inconvenience and more like taking back something that always belonged to you.